Cool.
Okay.
There
Okay,
you are.
we're recording.
Awesome.
So this in theory should save, and then I can kind of figure out how to make it work. So
Okay.
here we go.
Taking my
Hey
sunglasses off.
everyone. Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of REWILD Motherhood. I'm super excited because I think in theory I finally figured out how to interview other super badass mamas. My friend Jenny is here. You can find her over at camprents. We connected actually over me not having the right gear for a backpacking trip, which is kind of what Jenny and I are gonna ramble on about today. After having kids and then trying to get back in the outdoors, I totally felt like I didn't belong and like I had no idea what I was doing and I was wildly underprepared. And Jenny runs camprents, which rents out gear to people. Maybe you could jump in really quick and explain it better.
Yeah. So I am a mail order gear rental company. So for people who aren't super close to like an REI or aren't college students, because a lot of colleges will rent you gear, I will ship you gear anywhere you want to take it. So directly to your house or to your final location. Everything from I just need a warmer sleeping bag all the way through here's a backpack packed with everything you need to not die in the woods for 3 days.
Which is what Jenny did for me. And getting back into backpacking was like super scary. I felt like a total imposter. I felt like I wasn't ready. And like once I got the gear, I was like, oh man, it's getting real again. Like, I wonder if I can do this. There are people out there who like in the, 5 years, 7 years that I've taken off have just gotten better at this. And I was feeling super intimidated. And I think that's kind of what Jenny and I like bonded over, was the fact that like the outdoors is for everyone and that feeling shouldn't exist. So I'm going to kind of let you monologue real quick and then I'll interrupt you as necessary.
Yeah, so speaking about backpacking being intimidating, so I'm currently sitting in my front yard in beautiful suburban Cleveland, Ohio. And a couple years ago, I won the lottery for some permits for Half Dome, along with a few days in the backcountry in Yosemite, right? Really hard life.
I know, right? I'm so sorry for you. That must have been so hard.
I had never been backpacking before when I got these. I live in Ohio where there are not mountains. So I was trying to like build a gear closet from scratch and build my physical fitness at the same time. And I was doing all of this with two small kids. And, like married and had a house and a mortgage and like basically the complete polar opposite of like the dirtbag van life that you see all over Instagram.
Right. I know. I like to joke. I'm like a dirtbag, but like I have more responsibility now. Like I haven't figured out how to do anything but dirtbag, except that I just have more things to do.
Yeah. Like I'm a dirtbag with a mortgage. Like that.
Exactly.
That's it. That's all we got. So yeah, it was humbling and it was really intimidating because the margin for error when you're doing this stuff, when you're backpacking, is pretty small, right? When you're car camping, like literally worst case scenario, you peel out of the campsite at 1 o'clock in the morning and you go home.
Right.
Backpacking, when you're 30 miles in, that's not so easy. So we spent a ton of time and effort and research. Like we were frequent flyers at our backpacking shops, bugging everybody for all of their insight. What do we need? What do we do for food? What do we want to do as far as water purification? Do we like a gravity filter? Do we want one that we have to pump? Do we like the little Sawyer squeezes? Like, what do we want? And if you want to have a conversation about gear, like we could literally debate all of these things. I have so many opinions about tents and water filters. It's ridiculous.
Which is like seriously one of the reasons I'm so thankful when I reached out to you as a company, because I'm like the exact opposite. I'm like the most aggressively type B. So I'm like, yeah, it'll totally be fine. Like we're going to like throw some shit in a bag. It's going to be fine. And like pre-kids, this worked out like relatively well.
Yeah.
And now like post, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't have like snacks. Everything's ruined. My life is over.
Riot. Yeah.
Things are going to hit shit's going to hit the fan. And so knowing that like I could reach out to you and be like, help me again. Yeah. And know that you had the research behind it was super rad.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun to put all this stuff together and like the gear testing and selecting all the stuff that goes into our kits. It was a blast. And we're just about to the point now where I want to start adding some new inventory. So I'm debating adding some stuff for people who are looking for a slightly higher level of difficulty.
Oh, cool.
So I'd love to get like a couple of hyperlight tents, or, you know, like maybe a tarp, a sleeping quilt if you wanted to cut some weight. And then I've gotten a lot of inquiries about ice gear, about crampons and axes. And
Well, if you need a buddy to go, we'll learn mountaineering together and we'll test all your gear.
That sounds perfect.
Because
Are
two
you?
girls from the Midwest should
Yeah.
definitely take each other mountaineering.
We have all the skills that we need. I don't know what could possibly go
I know.
wrong.
We'll be totally fine. So safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Just be aware. Sorry, I'm still really hung up on this. I read Beth Rodden's piece in the New York Times um, about how her sponsors treated her when she was pregnant, and how her climbing, sorry, for people who don't know, Beth Rodden's a professional climber. She's a tremendous badass. She's amazing, and I love her. And she now has a child, and she was talking about, you know, how climbing is different now that she's a mom. And I made the mistake of reading the comments as well. So just so we're clear, right? Wanting to do anything outside makes us bad parents.
Yeah. Oh, no. Duh.
Yeah.
Like, we're the worst.
Yeah.
Will you tell the story about your family when you were going to Half Dome? Because I was like, this infuriates me, and also I relate on such a deep level. Because that was like, that's intense, but it's not uncommon.
Yeah. So like I said, when we went to Half Dome, we had 2 small kids, and thank God for my parents, who are very involved, very present grandparents, who agreed to take them while we were in Yosemite, because there was absolutely no way that we were taking our children to Yosemite with us. And so, you know, as we were having a lot of discussions going up to this, like, my parents just have a very different relationship with the outdoors, and also a different relationship with risk. Like, it's not better or worse, it's just very different. And they made it very clear that they didn't approve of a backpacking trip and a trip up Half Dome. They made it very clear that they thought that we were wrong for doing this, irresponsible and straight up bad parents.
Which is like the last thing you need to hear when you're like trying to venture into something like slightly intimidating anyway.
Yeah.
Is to hear that like somehow you're making sacrifices that don't involve just you, but like involve your kids. Like, I know for me, like, my first thought all the time is my kids. And like, as I'm trying to like branch out and do more things, people are like, well, what about your kids? I'm like, what about my kids? I'm constantly thinking about it. Like, this isn't like me rejecting motherhood. This is like me embracing my stuff, and then in turn one day maybe sharing that with them.
Yeah. So the way I feel about it is that I have to build these skills now if I'm going to teach them to my kids later.
Amen.
And that, yeah, and they're 6 and 3, right? Like, so that we're still working on car camping. My oldest is a pretty decent car camper, and I think he's about at the size now where he would enjoy like a really short backpacking trip.
Yeah.
But I can't do this and have these great adventures with them if I don't build these skills myself, because I didn't grow up with them. Like, this is my shot. I came to the outdoors really late.
Same.
So I can't remember if I told you the story about the first like long hike that I ever took, and I spent a really long time debating whether I should wear flip-flops or sneakers.
That's amazing.
Yeah. By the way, if we're ever in Virginia, the hike that I took was the iconic like Shenandoah hike of Old Rag Mountain, which is 8 miles round trip, and the top mile.
Obviously wear flip-flops.
You should wear flip-flops, right? And the top mile is a granite scramble, so those would have been great. I did make the right choice and wear sneakers. And thank God for my friends who were so supportive and so sweet, and were like, we will go slow. We're going to stop and wait. But like this is my chance. Like, if I don't build these skills now, I'm never going to be able to share this with my kids. And it's too much fun not to.
Yeah.
So like, we do a lot of stuff together. Like, we go on a lot of hikes. We do a reasonable amount of camping for a family that has one child that does not sleep in tents. Oh yeah, it's great. But yeah, I mean, there's still got to be time, and there's got to be time for parents to have adventures too. You know, this is one of the things that my husband and I do together, is we go on camping and backpacking trips.
Yeah. I think that's like a super important part of like the journey for me as a mom was, and I think I talked about this a while ago on one of the videos, was when I had my first son, I was like, no, like, perfect mom, stays here, doesn't do anything for herself. Like, that is what you do. And as I've and I was 22 when I had my son, so I was super young. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I like blatantly still don't know what I'm doing. But at least now I've like grown into it being like, I am entitled. And sometimes that word comes off as like a super negative connotation. But like, people are entitled to, you know, pursue their passions and like feel good about those things. You don't have to feel guilty or like you traded something for something else. Like you're just making those decisions. And then like you said, in turn, you can share that later. Like, you know, if you don't know how to whitewater raft and you take your kids, it's going to be a shit show. But if you take the time to learn that skill and hone that skill and enjoy doing it, then sharing that won't be as hard and it won't be as scary.
Right.
So,
and
rad on you, Mom.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned whitewater rafting because I've been watching the water reports and trying to, there's a place like 2 hours from us that's billed as like your family's first whitewater rafting, where the river really wide, really smooth. And so I'm dying to take the kids there because I think they'd really love it.
That'd be so rad.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back to the point that you made at the beginning about being intimidated to be in the outdoors. And one thing that I've noticed since having kids is that it does ratchet up my own personal risk. It not ratchet up my risk tolerance, but it messes with my risk dial in some ways that I did not expect. So, you know, like when I was having this conversation with my parents and they were like, you know, this is a bad idea. You shouldn't be doing this. You have kids who need their parents. I'm like, yeah. You guys understand that I spent today reading the search and rescue team reports out of Yosemite to learn what not to do, which is my favorite tip, by the way. If you're planning a backpacking trip, go find the search and rescue reports for the place where you were, or where you're aiming at, and you'll learn what not to do. It's great.
That's a really solid pro tip right there.
Yeah. So a lot of it boils down to don't get heat stroke. And if you don't have really great navigational skills, don't try to hike over snow in the mountains when you can't see where the trail is. You're going to get lost. But yeah, so it's just different. Like even when the kids aren't with us, it's different. But when the kids are, it adds a whole nother level. So we were hiking in one of the parks near us on a loop that we've done a million times. And there's this part at the top that's not particularly well marked. We had the kids with us and we got a little lost. And they were hungry and we were hungry and the wheels very rapidly came off. And all I could think about was like, I don't have the luxury of doing the traditional, we'll find this ridge and follow this ridge until it meets up with the trail. Like we absolutely have to backtrack to where the trail was because we can't afford to spend any more time mucking around in the woods.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's just really in a way that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. I feel like that's a huge part of it. Like I think you said it. Hold on one second. What? No. Okay, then find them. Well, then you'll be fine with no shoes. Sorry. See, this is the beauty of trying to do these things like as a mom outdoors. I'm like, no, I don't know where your Crocs are. No, you can't swim naked.
Yeah.
The word luxury is like a really great terminology for that. Like I didn't realize it pre-kids, but there is this luxury of being like, okay, like this little mistake isn't all of a sudden a huge problem.
Right.
Which is a big thing to think about.
Yeah, like backpacking, if I'm thinking about, or even just like day hiking, you know, if I'm thinking about packing for just me, worst case scenario, I know I can go 24, 36 hours without food if I have to.
Yeah.
They can't. I'm going to make it overnight in 40-degree weather. That's not an option for them. Yeah. So it changes the level of security that you need. And in a way that does not lend itself to feeling like a very outdoors person because you're like, I am camping with 3 stuffed animals and a bunch of Pop-Tarts and like 16 pairs of shoes because my girl needs, you know, her fancy sandals.
Yep. Amen to that. Like, you know, this last trip we packed for, we were getting ready to go backpacking. There ended up being a thunderstorm. So again, like another thing where it's like, well, for my husband and I, we're like, the odds of the storm are slightly slim. Yeah. So like we would take that chance, but with 3 kids, we're not going to take that chance because there'll be basket cases. But as we were packing, I was like, it's very strange to me to be packing her Elsa dress, like rolled up into her sleeping bag. I'm like, I guess this is a necessity according to her. So this is what we're doing now. So it is. It's a totally different approach to every part of outdoorsing. And it does leave you feeling, at least for me, I feel kind of like an amateur. Like every single time I'm like, look at us rolling in with 90,000 pounds of gear all the dang time. I swear I'm outdoorsy. I promise.
But on the other
No.
hand, so two other hands, because I'm some sort of like multi-handed critter
Yeah,
here,
I'm
like an
like so
octopus.
many other hands.
So many, or maybe a starfish. Maybe I only have five. So on the one hand, I would say like you are by definition just as outdoorsy as like Andrew Skirka with his 3.5 pound backpack for his 3 month trip. Um, yeah, dude's insane. Like
That's madness.
I love him, but he's insane.
Yeah.
Because you're outside. And not only are you actually doing the thing, but you're getting your kids outside, even if it does require an Elsa dress and 90 pounds of gear. On the other hand, I think I'm up to hand two now. When it
Yeah.
is
We
just
have three
you,
more.
like I've seen you roll up to a solo trip with like a single backpack and be like, ta-da, here I am. Here's everything I need. And also I don't have children, so like I don't care. So the skills are still there.
Yeah.
They're just not it's all about picking the right setting, right?
Right. Right.
And then on the third hand that I have,
Yep.
um
Extra hands.
yeah, I think whatever you need to take to get your kids into the outdoors is automatically justifiable weight.
Right.
Whatever it takes, because what is the alternative? Not doing it?
Yeah. That's a
Um,
solid point.
yeah. So
Like, that's a super, I think that's something that people who are watching this right now should definitely take away is like, I feel like sometimes for me, I'm like, oh man, if I cut this thing, I'll feel better
mhm,
about like what our outdoor situation is. And then I stop and I'm like, but if I don't have this thing, it's going to be a shit show. And
mhm,
like my husband will be like, why do we have such big packs? And da 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 da. And I'm like, fine, you take away the goldfish
mhm,
bag because that's like extra snacks we don't need. And then
mhm.
explain to our kids when they're trying to mutiny on the trail
Yep.
why we don't have the goldfish.
Yep.
Like,
This is why my first aid kit has like 3,000 band-aids in it.
yup.
Because no, we don't need the band-aids, but yes, we need the
We need
band-aids.
Band-Aids. The world's most expensive stickers. That's what I
Yeah.
call them. Like, they fix literally everything. And so I
Yep.
think that's a really solid point, that you're making, and I really appreciate it, is getting your kids outside and being outside is every like bit as valid and as affirming as, the people who are like scaling Everest. And that's why I started this whole Rewild Motherhood thing initially, was because like I didn't like feeling invalidated in my
Mhm.
outdoor pursuits. And I think you can probably relate a bunch too. Just being
Mhm.
in the Midwest sometimes feels invalidating.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
I deliberately wore my Cuyahoga Valley National Park
I was
shirt for
digging it. I
this.
like it. I
Yeah.
like it.
It's a Cleveland Clothing Company shirt. If anybody wants it, this is not sponsored. I just really love them. Um,
I
but
love it.
I just like to rep my national park because we have one and not everybody knows about it, and it's
Yeah.
spectacular. Yeah, the Midwest is overlooked.
Yeah.
I know that you and I are both part of this group that's intended to make the Midwest into more of a adventure travel destination.
Yeah.
We have great water. Like the Great Lakes are no joke.
Yeah. They are
And
actually great, literally.
yeah, and we have really beautiful sandstone ledges. Like if you're a person who took a 6-year break from climbing and is just now getting back into it, like a 30-foot sandstone ledge with those beautiful little holes in it is exactly what you need.
Right? Exactly. Amen
Yeah,
to that. And I think
I'm.
that's the thing. Like I can't stress it enough. Like it is just as valid. Yeah, like maybe it's not as like Instagram worthy, or like it's not big views. They're not epic views, but they're stunning and they're special, and you can do all the things and still enjoy all the things. Like there's so much to be seen and done here, and I have to sometimes even stoke myself up about it, because like it is easy to get caught in that like, oh darn it, Midwest rut. But then like
Yeah.
you do all the things and you're like, wow, it is really great here still.
And the other thing about the Midwest is that it's not all just one place.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I really loved about the retreat that we were on in Wisconsin was we drove across like 2 states to get to Wisconsin, and then the entire time I was basically glued to the window, going, "Look at this and look at this! I
Yeah.
love this state. It's so gorgeous." So even just getting out and poking around different parts of the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
is so much fun because it's so different.
Right.
Like
Like
Wisconsin is
technically
gorgeous.
it's beautiful, and technically like the Badlands are part of the
Oh,
Midwest, like which are like
oh,
my favorite. I love them so much.
oh.
And like they're the Midwest. So I think when people think of the Midwest, they think of like, pastoral rolling hills, and there's just so much more to it. And so ignoring all these, I guess what it boils down to for me is learning to ignore all these little things that make outdoorsing feel less valid than other people. And I think that's the key for me, at least, is finding a way to tune out. I'm not outdoorsy enough. My place isn't outdoorsy enough. My space isn't good enough.
Yeah.
And
I
owning
don't
that.
I don't know about you. I would not want to presume, but I'm a bit of an extremist.
Oh, same.
So if I'm going to be outdoorsy, then obviously the best way to be outdoorsy is to live in a tent at Camp 4 and be like climbing in Yosemite all the time. Like that's it.
Obviously.
That's the
Yeah.
most valid way to be outdoorsy, and everything else is further down on the spectrum.
Yeah, it's like there's like shades of outdoorsy, and I
Yeah.
feel like I'm living at the solid base right now.
Right.
And because I'm like an extreme, I'm like, well, if we're not like packing in wicked far with no contact and I need my like Garmin to know where I'm going, then like,
Yeah.
it doesn't count.
I mean, if you can get GPS signal, are you even really outside? But like, if I were gonna draw an analogy, right? It's like deciding that marathoning or ultra marathoning is the only valid form of running.
Which I definitely also grapple with. So.
100%. But like, I think there's a lot of Olympians out there who would disagree. 100-meter dash is a incredibly difficult sport, and there's a bit of cherry picking there as well, because I'm not speedy at all.
Yeah,
I'm
the slowest. So.
Yeah, like I'm much more suited for long distances. Give me, like 15 miles that I can just go at a leisurely pace, and I'm very happy.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said for the 5K and 10K version of outdoorsiness.
Yes, I love that. I think that like, I'm gonna like, where's the shirt for that? I'm 5K outdoorsy.
I'm a 5K outdoorsy.
Because I think that's so true. Like, I think also just in terms of like social media and how people share and how information is spread now, it becomes, it feels like there shouldn't be that competition, but it's present in that, like, how are you validating your space in the outdoor community? And I feel like that shouldn't exist. And it's important to work against that. But it's, it takes practice. It's hard to do.
It does. And I think a lot of it is learning to recognize and be mindful of the other styles of outdoorsy. So it takes a very special, certain kind of person to wear a crop top on top of a mountain.
Yeah, I am not one of those people.
I'm not one of those people.
Variety of
I'm not. Look, if you're out there wearing a crop top on top of a mountain, please know that I admire your abs and I think you're fabulous. This isn't to run you down, but it's also about finding like the people in your neighborhood who have gone for a walk by the lake to look at the herons every day for 25 years.
Exactly.
Find the people who are taking their kids camping for 6 hours because that's how long the baby lasts before, like they're just done.
Yeah, it's over.
Right. Find the people who go on a couple backpacking trips a year. Like every place on that spectrum is equally valid.
Exactly. And we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I appreciate hearing this from you because, like, for me, before I like met you and I got to know you, I'm like, oh man, this woman runs like this gear rental company. And I'm like this putz who's like, hey, so I like your gear. That's really neat. And it's intimidating. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh man, like she's not going to want to like hear about my 3 kids and my inability to like haul my, now only 6-person tent through the backcountry. You know what I mean? And so it's nice and it's validating when you see people who you are worried maybe aren't on that level or who won't get it because they're like heavily invested in the outdoors who do get it. It's an amazing testament to just like moms being able to come together and be like, I see you, I get it. And I think that is one of the driving forces for me behind this entire project is moms being like, yeah, like, I see you, lady. Like, I get it.
Yeah. And for the record, when I was reading your bio, I was like, oh, wow, she does all this work with all these nonprofits and helping victims of human trafficking. Like, and I just run this company out of my basement. Like, cool.
Well, see, that's like the perfect example. A friend of mine, Kika, who is also doing the human trafficking, like walk against it and stuff. She's amazing. And she was like, people are their harshest critics. And it's really easy to get down on yourself for like not being what you either were or aim to be eventually. Like, it's really easy to be frustrated. And I think it's important to acknowledge where you are, where you were, and where you're going, but also to celebrate, that entire journey and that entire process, and to feel valid in it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I hadn't really thought about comparing yourself to where you were as part of that comparison being really insidious. I guess I know we have to wrap up, but I wonder if we could just like tie a bow on it and think
Yeah.
about not comparing yourself to who you were in the outdoors pre-kids.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of your life looks different after kids. Your outdoors life is going to look different too.
Yeah.
And, it's not better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah.
Although it's probably a lot more fun to throw rocks into water with kids. Like,
yeah, you don't look like quite as much of a crazy. So there's that.
They're the best excuse to do dumb shit. Like,
I know,
I just
seriously,
love it.
I know, like, I thank my kids for that one. I'm like, thank you for letting me look like a wackadoodle.
Yep.
Or like, when I'm like tired, I'm like, yes, we will absolutely stop it a quarter of a mile. Like,
Yep.
No, this is totally your choice, not mine.
Yep.
But, but yeah, I'm so glad that like that resonated, and I'm so glad because like that has been one of the hardest things for me. We lived in Montana, we were in Glacier, and I was like, this is where I should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not there now, 3 kids, and who knows if I'll ever be there again, but it is what it is. And I think, like you said, the perfect word is insidious for those comparisons.
Yeah.
So I'm like so glad we did this. I'm so glad we met. And
yes.
Really quick, the group that Jenny is talking about is Women of the Wild Midwest, right? Wild Women of the Midwest. I always do it
Women of the Wild Midwest. Yeah.
There we go. They're amazing. They host getaways. Jenny and I got to meet there. It was super, super fun. And now to like literally actually plug your camprents thing, it really is the best. And like, I'm so impressed that you came up with that idea. Like that, that's an amazing notion.
Yeah. So if anybody's curious, my handle is camprents on Instagram. You can also find me at camprents.com. If you've got questions about gear, you just want to talk, hit me up. If you want to rent anything, let me know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. I'm going to stop the recording really quick.
Cool.
In theory here, stop recording.